I used to think trust was something you built slowly, like stacking little stones until they formed a wall strong enough to lean on. Lately, though, it felt like someone had been quietly pulling stones out when I wasn't looking. I'd lie awake at night next to a woman I loved, wondering why I suddenly felt like a guest in my own life, why every small detail around me felt just slightly off. That discomfort wasn't loud. It was quiet, almost polite, but it was constant, and it was starting to wear me down. Most days I worked long shifts at a small hardware store. Nothing fancy, just a place with dusty aisles and regulars who wanted to talk more than they wanted to shop. When my shift ended, I usually drove straight home, hoping for a calm evening. My girlfriend Ashley worked part-time at a floral shop across town, something she always said she loved. Her schedule was simple, predictable, yet she always came home exhausted, claiming everything at the shop had been crazy again. I didn't question it at first. Everyone has bad days. But little things piled up. Ashley used to text me during her lunch break, photos of goofy flower arrangements, comments about rude customers, a joke she overheard. Then those messages slowed down, then stopped entirely. When I asked about it, she laughed it off, saying her boss had cracked down on phones. I didn't know much about florists, but that didn't sound like the kind of workplace that policed cell phones. I let it go, telling myself I was overthinking. Then she started guarding her phone. Ashley had never cared before. She'd leave it plugged in on the kitchen counter, buzzing with notifications she never bothered to silence. But now she kept it face down, locked tight with a new passcode she claimed she set by accident. When I reached for it one night to hand it to her, she snatched it like I was grabbing a hot stove. She apologized immediately, but the tension in her voice was unmistakable. Evenings became strange. Ashley used to curl up next to me on the couch, her feet tucked under my leg, scrolling through TV channels until she found something we both liked. Lately, she sat at the far end, claiming she needed space to stretch, her eyes drifting to her phone every few minutes. If it buzzed, she'd hesitate before checking it, then tilt the screen away just slightly. One Friday, she didn't come home until nearly midnight. I had called her twice, something I almost never did. When she finally walked through the door, she smelled faintly of cologne. Nothing overpowering, just enough that I noticed. She shrugged it off as someone at the shop hugging her goodbye, which made absolutely no sense. But I didn't push. I felt this uncomfortable mix of suspicion and guilt, like I was betraying her simply by noticing inconsistencies. The lies didn't come in dramatic bursts. They came in soft excuses and easy half-truths. A forgotten shift change, a coworker who needed help cleaning the shop late at night, a sudden girls' night that conveniently started right after dinner but ended long after bars usually closed. Ashley delivered these explanations with a calm, practiced tone, the same voice she used when telling strangers what bouquets worked best for weddings. But the moment that stuck with me, the moment that anchored everything, was when she called me by the wrong pet name. We were making dinner, something simple like pasta, and she casually said, "Could you hand me the sauce, babe?" Except she didn't say babe. She used a name she had never once called me, a quiet, intimate nickname that felt foreign coming out of her mouth. Her face froze. She quickly recovered, pretending she'd mumbled. But her eyes darted away just for a second, and that was enough. From that point on, every detail sharpened. Every late arrival, every odd scent, every carefully shielded text. I wasn't angry yet. Anger comes when you finally admit what's happening. I wasn't there. I was in that painful middle place where doubt feels like a knot in your chest you can't untie. I didn't want to accuse her of anything. I didn't want to play detective. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the life I thought we were building had a crack running straight down the middle. And that crack was widening. I just didn't know how deep it went yet. The night everything finally snapped didn't look dramatic from the outside. There was no screaming, no slam doors, no big cinematic moment. It started with the kind of detail most people would overlook. I had the day off, so I stopped by Ashley's favorite diner to pick up lunch for both of us. She'd said she was working a short shift at the floral shop, done by noon. I figured I'd surprise her with takeout and we could eat together at home. But when I pulled into the diner's parking lot, I saw her car parked across the street near a row of small boutiques. It wouldn't have meant anything. People park there all the time, except she wasn't supposed to be anywhere near that side of town. I was about to assume she'd just changed plans when I spotted her. She wasn't alone. Ashley walked out of a cafe with a man I'd never seen before. He wasn't touchy with her, nothing obvious, but they walked close, too close. She laughed in a way I hadn't heard from her in months. Not the tired, distracted laugh she gave me. This one was warm, light, the kind you give someone who makes you feel comfortable, someone you want to impress, someone you shouldn't be comfortable with if you already have a partner. I didn't confront them. I stayed in my car, watching as they stood on the sidewalk, talking like there were no complications waiting at home. When her phone buzzed in her hand, she didn't check it. She just silenced it and kept smiling at him. That tiny gesture hit harder than I expected. When she finally left, walking toward her car, I didn't follow. I drove home with lunch containers cooling on the passenger seat. My stomach twisted in a tight knot. I kept running through all the excuses she might give, all the ways she'd spin it. She'd say it was just a coworker, or someone who came into the shop, or a friend I'd somehow never heard of. For the first time, I realized the truth didn't matter to her as much as keeping the lie intact. She came home an hour later, cheerful in a way that felt rehearsed. She kissed my cheek like nothing was wrong, like the day had been perfectly normal. When I asked how work had gone, she gave me one of her practiced lines. "Crazy busy again. I'm exhausted." Her hands shook just slightly as she opened the lunch container I'd left out on the counter. Not from guilt, I think, more from knowing she needed to maintain a story. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I wasn't ready yet. Over the next few days, cracks widened. Ashley's explanations became sloppier. She'd mix up details, say she was with her friend Aaron, then claim she was alone, then mention something Aaron supposedly said that didn't fit either version. She got defensive easily, even if I asked something simple like whether she wanted dinner at home or out. Her guilt didn't show in big ways. It showed in the tension behind her smile, the way her voice tightened when she realized she'd contradicted herself. The breaking point came on a Thursday night. She said she was going to a coworker's birthday dinner. Normally, I wouldn't question that. But when she left, wearing a dress I hadn't seen her wear in over a year, the dress she'd once said she was saving for something special, the pit in my stomach hit harder than ever. If this shift had a birthday dinner, nobody had mentioned it before, and she didn't take a gift or a card, not even flowers, which would have been the easiest thing in the world for someone who worked in a floral shop. She left at 6:30. At 7:10, my phone buzzed. It was a text from her. "Running late at work, heading out soon. Love you." I stared at the message for a long time. She had already gone to the dinner. She had already left the house. And yet here she was, pretending she was still at work. That was it. The moment the knot in my chest finally loosened. Not in relief, but in clarity. I wasn't imagining anything. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't insecure. I was being lied to. Blatantly. Repeatedly. Confidently. And she thought I'd never question it. That night, while she was out with whoever she was actually meeting, I sat in our quiet living room and finally let myself feel everything. Hurt, frustration, disbelief. But beneath all of that, something steadier began forming. A decision. I wasn't going to yell or accuse or beg for honesty. That wasn't who I was, and it wouldn't change anything. Ashley had built herself a world where lies were more convenient than truth. Fine. I'd let her keep building it, and then I'd let her entire story collapse under its own weight. Once the denial finally burned off, everything became strangely clear. I didn't want dramatic revenge. I didn't want screaming matches or emotional speeches. I just wanted the truth laid out plainly, without me having to argue for it. If Ashley was going to betray me, she was going to do it in her own words, in a way she couldn't twist later. I didn't need to expose her. I needed her to expose herself. So I started small. Ashley had a habit of forgetting things she said, not because she was scattered, but because she tried to keep too many stories straight at once. I leaned into that. Whenever she mentioned her shifts, I'd ask a casual follow-up question. Nothing suspicious, nothing pointed. Just enough for the details to stack up. Every answer she gave contradicted one from earlier in the week. I wrote everything down, not to use against her, just so I could keep track of what was real and what wasn't. Soon, the notes formed a timeline, her version of the truth falling apart in neat, organized lines. The next step came naturally. Ashley had stopped letting her phone out of her sight, but she still used her laptop freely around me. She wasn't tech-savvy, but she wasn't reckless either. Still, she had one blind spot. She synced her texts. I discovered it by accident when a notification popped up while she was in the shower. I didn't open anything. I didn't snoop. I just noted the contact name, C. The same letter she'd used once when she said, "C stopped by the shop today," a story I'd accepted then shrugged off. From that point forward, I didn't check messages. I didn't need to. Every time a notification popped up, I took note of the timestamps. Where she said she was, what she said she was doing, whether texting would have been possible based on the story she fed me. It wasn't about gathering proof. It was about confirming pattern after pattern of dishonesty. Her world was running on two tracks, and she thought I couldn't see either one clearly. But I could. A week later, the moment I needed fell into my lap. Ashley had forgotten her laptop charger at home before leaving for another co-worker dinner. She called me from her car, asking if I could bring it to her friend Aaron's place. She sounded frazzled, rushed, eager for me to just agree and hang up. That alone was off. She never asked me for favors like that. So I drove to Aaron's house. Aaron answered the door in sweatpants, clearly in for the night. She looked at me with genuine confusion when I asked if Ashley was there. "No," she said slowly. "We haven't hung out in weeks." She wasn't lying. She wasn't covering. She was just confused. That was all the confirmation I needed. I thanked her, walked back to my truck, and drove home. I placed the laptop charger neatly on Ashley's desk and sat down on the couch waiting. My plan wasn't about confrontation. It was about giving her every possible opportunity to tell the truth, because she wouldn't. And when she didn't, the rest would fall into place. She got home 2 hours later than she said she'd be back. She smelled like the same cologne from before, just faint enough that she'd probably assumed I wouldn't notice. "Oh," she said, startled to see me awake. "Aaron's dinner ran long." I let the silence sit, not uncomfortable, just clear. "Did she like the flowers you brought?" I asked. Ashley froze. "What? You said you were bringing flowers from the shop." She blinked. "Yeah, I did. She loved them." So she was doubling down, confident, steady, no hesitation. That told me everything. The next morning while she slept, I gathered every practical detail of our shared life. My clothes, my documents, the few gifts from my parents, the tools my dad gave me before I moved out. Nothing dramatic, nothing messy. I wasn't running away. I was preparing. I rented a small place 2 neighborhoods over, month to month, cheap, quiet, a short drive from my job. I didn't move anything yet. I just needed the option, the space, the clean slate waiting on standby. Then came the final step of my plan. I told Ashley I had to cover more shifts at work, longer days, later hours. I didn't. I just needed her to believe I'd be out of the house. And she did, easily, quickly, almost gratefully. The more freedom she thought she had, the faster she slipped into patterns she couldn't hide. That Friday, she told me she'd be at a coworker's birthday party. I kissed her goodbye, told her to have fun, and left the house with my jacket and keys. Then I circled the block, parked, and waited. 40 minutes later, her car pulled out of the driveway. She didn't drive toward the floral shop. She didn't drive toward any restaurant. She didn't drive toward anything she'd ever mentioned. She drove straight across town, to the same cafe where I'd seen her with him. I didn't follow her inside. I didn't confront her. I didn't take pictures. I didn't need to. Watching her walk through that door, comfortable, confident, certain I was nowhere near, was the final piece of truth I'd been waiting for. She had built her story. Now I was ready to let it collapse exactly the way she'd built it, quietly and entirely by her own choices. The next morning I woke earlier than usual. Not because I was anxious, because everything finally lined up in my head. I wasn't scared, angry, or confused anymore. I felt something closer to steady. Ashley had written the ending herself. All I had to do was turn the page. She came home late that night, tiptoeing through the hallway like someone returning from a place they shouldn't have been. She thought I was asleep. I let her believe that. It made things simpler. By sunrise, I was already dressed, the keys to my truck in my pocket, and a small stack of envelopes on the kitchen table. Each one held a piece of the truth, not dramatic evidence, not photos, nothing invasive, just brief, factual notes, dates, times. Her own explanations copied word for word. The contradictions sat neatly underneath. No commentary from me. She didn't need my opinion. She only needed to see how thoroughly she'd unraveled her own story. I didn't wait for her to wake up. I grabbed my essentials, things I'd already sorted and packed days earlier, and headed for the door. The house felt hollow in a way that didn't hurt anymore. It felt like a place I'd already left weeks ago, long before this morning. By the time she stumbled into the kitchen, groggy and confused, I was gone. I wasn't cruel. I sent her one final text before I turned the key in my new apartment door. Everything you've been looking for is on the table. Take care of yourself. No anger, no accusations, no dramatic goodbye, just truth. For the first time in months, my phone stayed silent. No frantic calls, no tears, no apologies pouring in. She didn't reach out at all for the first hour, probably reading the notes, probably realizing I hadn't snooped. I had simply paid attention. Her lies weren't exposed by me, they were exposed by themselves. Eventually, a single text came through. We need to talk. Please. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to talk about. Closure wasn't something she could give me. I had already taken it for myself the moment I walked out the door. Later that afternoon, Ashley showed up at the hardware store. She walked in looking small, unsure, like someone trying to rewind a tape that had already snapped. She asked if we could go somewhere private. I shook my head. This wasn't a conversation that needed hiding. She tried everything, playing confused, apologizing, even crying when she realized confusion wasn't working. She said it wasn't what it looked like, a line so worn out it barely registered. She tried to shift blame onto stress, onto her job, onto misunderstandings. But every explanation contradicted something else she'd told me. She tangled herself in her words the same way she had at home. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse her of anything. I simply told her I hoped she took care of herself, the same way I'd said in the message. And then I walked away, leaving her standing between the aisles of wrenches and lawn tools, the same place I'd spent years talking with people who had no reason to lie to me. She kept texting for a few days. Long paragraphs, short paragraphs, questions, apologies, promises. Eventually the messages slowed, then stopped. I didn't block her. I didn't need to. Her silence was its own kind of ending. In the weeks that followed, my life got quieter. Not empty, just peaceful. I started waking up without that knot in my chest. I cooked meals in my new kitchen with the windows open. I sat on the couch without wondering who was lying to me. I slept deeper. I laughed more easily. I felt like myself again, not the version of me who tiptoed around someone else's secrets. One afternoon, while unpacking the last of my things, I found the dress shirt Ashley had once given me for my birthday. It didn't hurt to see it. It didn't feel nostalgic. It felt like an object from a time that belonged to someone else. Someone who still believed every stone in the wall was solid. I folded it neatly and dropped it at a donation bin on my way to work. The moral I walked away with wasn't dramatic. It wasn't bitter either. It was simple. Betrayal doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it shows up in soft lies, quiet evasions, and small inconsistencies. Sometimes the person you trust the most becomes the one who teaches you to pay attention. Not to their words, but to their patterns. And sometimes the best revenge isn't proving someone wrong. It's stepping into a life where their lies have no place at all.